So let's work on an interface example called series. So series will describe the methods to generate a series of number in a sequential fashion. So to create our interface, so in this interface we'll have three methods. First, integer get next, which will return the next value, a void reset, which will again reset the series back to whichever the initial values. Also, another method called set start, which will set the initial value to start. So this will take an integer x. Alright, so let's create a class that will implement the series interface. So our first example will be a class called ByTwos, basically a ByTwos series, which will return every other value from the start. This will implement series. Okay. So, and as we said in the definition, ByTwos class should implement all these three methods from the series interface. But before we do that, our ByTwos class will have two instance variables. One of them is called start, which will help us keep the start value. Another integer called val, which will hold the current value. So let's also create a constructor which will set the start to 0 and set the val to 0 as well. So our ByTwos series will start counting from 0, and then each time we call get next, it will return every other value basically from the start. So let's implement our three methods here. First, as we said earlier, the interface methods are implicitly public. So in order to implement them, we should explicitly make them public. Otherwise, you might get a compiler error. So first, public int get next. So this will first increase the current val by 2 and return it. Return val. Now let's implement the reset method. So it will be public void reset. So reset will help us to reset the counter back to the start value, which is 0. So set val to start. And finally, let's implement set start, which is also void set start, which will take an integer x and it will set the start to x, also set val to x. So set start to x and val to x. Okay, so we're done implementing the series interface on ByTwos. Let's also create our demo class to test and then see how it works. So now we need to define a class called series demo. This class should have a main method, and in this main method we need to create a ByTwos object. So how do we do that? ByTwos and an object called by2, which will be a new ByTwos. Right, so it's already the start value and the val already set to 0. So if we call get next, we'll get the next value after 0. So I'm going to use a print statement, println, and by2 dot get next. So if we call this twice by2.getNext, we should basically get the next two values after the start. So let's go ahead and test this to make sure it works well. Java C series demo.java, and it looks good. Java series demo. So the value after 0 was 2, and the value after that was 4. And then at some point, we can reset them. And I'm going to actually test this by using a for loop. So let's create a for loop. Integer I set from 0 to I less than 5. And I plus plus. So we're going to test to see how this works with next 5 values. PL by2.getNext. Let's try this. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and then call this again. But before we do that, I'm going to reset. So let's call reset by2.reset. Should reset it back to 0. And after that, if I call the loop once again, so we'll see that it will start from 0 again. So 2 to 10, 2 to 10. And I can do one more example. I can this time set by2.setStart. So start means I can set it to any value, basically, any start value. So I'm going to choose to do 100. Then I'm going to call this loop once again, which again will call by2.getNext 5 times. So let's try this. Here we go. So it started from 100 and the next value was 102, 104, 106, 108, and 110. So as we see in this example, ByTwos class implemented series, which also meant that we implemented all these 3 methods. However, a class which implements an interface can also has its own methods. And then let's see this in an example. So we can have another method here called, let's call this integer get current val. So if we want to read the current value without moving it to the next, we can use this method and then we can return val. So, and again, if you see that this is not part of the interface, but this is a method that only belongs to ByTwos. So how can we use this? Well, we can, like in this example, before we call each loop, we can actually get the current val. So by2.getCurrentVal, and I can copy this and then paste it right before each loop, so we know what the start values of each time we start counting. So let's test this. Here we go. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. One more time, and also we start from 100 and then 110. So this get current val will help us always read the current val without increasing